You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, it's me again, Mighty Blue, and you are listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Today, this is episode number 324, and our guest is Natisha Webb, or Calypso. Now, I normally go on a bit in these intros, but I'm on a bit of a time crunch at the moment for a very good reason, so I'll be somewhat briefer. While you're listening to this on Thursday morning, a doctor will be performing a colonoscopy on me, so if you have one of those, you'll know the sort of preparation I need to start very soon at 3:30 on this Wednesday afternoon. Anyway, after Natisha, we'll catch up with two of our Mighty Blue class of 2022, neither of which are currently on the trail. And we'll be catching up again with Katie Westling, who we followed last year. The good news is she's about to go back on the AT and complete her thru-hike. Then I'm reading the first part of Chapter 2 of Then the Hail Came by George Stephanos. Our hero has reached the NOC, which is a great place to be. Actually, there is one more thing to say before I introduce Natisha. Last week's conversation with Nathan and Kim elicited a response from those in favour of moving the southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail to Alabama. I got a phone call from Jeff Hayes, one of the people referred to by Nathan and Kim. He asked to come on the show to respond. So what we're going to do in the show the week after next is Jeff will come on and make his case, and then immediately after, Nathan will join the recording and the two of them will debate the issue. I hope you're going to find it instructive, because I sure will. Now, here's Natisha. Our guest today is Natisha Webb, otherwise known as Calypso. Hey, Natisha, how are you?
I'm doing good.
And you're Natisha, not Natasha, which I've never seen Natisha before. Okay. And I was recently told by somebody at Trail Days that I often get hikers to explain their trail names. I mention their trail names, but I call them by their real name. I don't know why I do that, by the way. So Calypso, why on earth are you called Calypso?
I was given that name a long time ago, actually, before the trail. I worked at a Boy Scout camp in the aquatics program, and we dressed up like pirates a lot, and the scouts called me Calypso, and it just carried on with me.
Right. So when you got on the trail, you decided to name yourself. You didn't want to be...
I just kept it, yep.
You didn't want to take another one. Did anybody try to offer you a name, or were you quite happy with Calypso?
I was happy with it.
Yeah, do you know what I think is the best thing? Go on the trail with a name already, because otherwise you could end up with some real crap name you don't want. Mm-hmm. So you wrote to me recently and thanking me for my account of the West Highland Way. You said you've already actually fixed up to do the hike next year.
Yep.
What was it about that hike that tempted you?
It's another one of those hikes that are just kind of calling to me. But the scenery, the fact that I've never been overseas.
Really?
Yeah. And it just sounds like a good, amazing place to go. And then your account of it just sold me on it. So.
My God. You need to get a life, girl. Dear me. No, I tell you, I love it. It's wonderful. Funny enough, I've been following on Facebook this week my friend Cushy Life, who I hiked with in 2019. She and her husband Rob and some friends have just done the West Highland Way and finished yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and they loved it as well. So I think you'll be surprised by the variety of scenery out there. You know, we were surrounded by snow-topped mountains quite a lot of the time, but fortunately no snow fell on us, which was, except for about 10 minutes. And so you're in your mid-30s, you've told me, which is kind of not as much an unusual demographic. I think it's getting more and more that way these days. But, you know, you seem to be able to take time out of work. What do you actually do? I'm
a mobile dog groomer.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So as a mobile dog groomer, do you work for somebody or work for yourself?
I do. I work for somebody, some very accommodating people.
Very accommodating people by the sound of these, yeah. Do they know you've booked to go to the West Highland Way next year?
Yes, they do. I asked them for the time off, and they agreed because it's a much shorter time off.
Right, yeah. Did they know when you went on the AT that you'd be going for 6 months, or was that?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
They are very accommodating there. And is it right that you live in a van?
I do. Mm-hmm.
You do. And talk to me about van life for a few minutes.
Van life is, it's very fun. It's a little challenging. It's not as glorious as Instagram would like to make it seem out to be.
I'm sure.
But I kind of knew that getting into it. It's the same thing with through hiking. It's not as glorious and glamorous as social media will have you believe. But I really enjoy it. I am looking for a newer van than what I'm currently in. But
Right.
yeah, I've been in it since October, and I'm like, yep, this is for me. So.
Is it so? By the way, is the van you've got? Is it the mobile dog groomers?
No, that's
with all sort of writing on the outside and everything.
Yeah, that's a different van.
So what do you do with it? Do you go to parks and things like that, or are you basically working all the time at the moment?
Currently, I'm working all the time. This van, because of its age and mechanical situation, I don't drive it out of town. I have a car that I never sold my car, so I still have it. But the idea is, yes, to when I'm not working, take the van, go off, and just go wherever I want.
Do you know what? That's such a tempting thing for me as well. I've got this thing in my head that I want to visit all the national parks and go and just stay there and hang out there and do a bit of hiking there. It's just this country, I don't think a lot of people realise how blessed we are with trails out there and parks out there. And whoever did it has done a wonderful thing for America. Now, you were one of the COVID 80 hikers. And I've always been grateful that I was part of the class of 2019. So obviously you decided you were going to do the 80 in 2020.
Yes.
But that wasn't your introduction to hiking, was it? You started off doing the Smokies in day hikes.
Yes.
What brought you to hiking, and what was your ambition at the time with the Smokies?
I was bored one day and decided to go check out Grotto Falls in the Smokies, and it's one of the more popular hikes. And coming back down, there were 3 women in front of me with packs on, and they were talking about how they stayed up at the top of the mountain. And I was like, man, I want to do that. And just kind of listened to their conversation as they were hiking in front of me, and then, hiked some more, and then grabbed a backpack and did it. Like, I just went for it.
But this is the sort of thing that kids do or old people do.
Well,
not normally women in their 30s.
Right.
I'm not saying why have you been I'm not saying why you've been wasting your life for 15 years, but no, why did it take you so much time to get to it?
I've always, when I was a kid, I was always outside in the outdoors, and then always running away into the woods. And then as I got older, got out of high school, I was in the Coast Guard for a few years, came out of that,
Right.
and just joined the real life, if you will, which, I just kind of did what real life told me to do for a while. And once I got out,
that's a bummer, isn't it?
it is. And once I started hiking in the Smokies, it started, I guess, reawakening whatever that was that I was when I was a child, just running away into the woods, finding that peace, that it gave me a good sense of balance, and it felt like it reset my mind every time I went out there and came back to the quote unquote real world.
Did you feel you needed something then? Was there something lacking that you felt in your life, or was it the noise of life? What was it?
I think I had no direction really until I started hiking, and then that kind of gave me some goals, and then the AT kind of called to me because it runs right through the Smokies, and
Yes,
I would see it, and I walked on it a little bit, and I saw the white blazes, and it was a big thing that I never thought I could ever do. And I wasn't going to wait until retirement to try and do it. I was like, well, now or never, just go.
Good for you.
Yeah.
It is an interesting age to do it. And were you concerned about dangers being on the trail?
No.
Why not? You should have been.
No. So my only concern when I'm out there is in high winds is trees falling on my head. That's the one thing I'm like, oh, please.
Especially when you're camping.
Yes, please don't let that happen.
Yeah.
But generally, no, I've always felt comfortable in the woods and in the wilderness, and I don't have those logical fears most people do, for better or for worse. No, I feel more comfortable out there than I do in town driving around. Like
Wow.
there you have if you think about it, like chances of you getting in a car wreck on the way to work are a lot higher than anything happening out there.
Sure,
That's
sure.
kind of how I see it.
And you know what, Natisha? I think that's one of the things that people don't get. I don't think they realise how remarkably safe you feel in the woods. I know that it took me quite a while to feel more comfortable, and I didn't stay a night by myself, in a tent with no one else around until about 400 miles. But I needn't have worried. I didn't die. I set up and I fell asleep. I was a bit nervous. I got to admit, I was a bit nervous. Did you do that at all? Did you find yourself sleeping alone in the woods at some stage quite early on?
I did. Not early on. I actually fell in line with a group of friends and we hiked on. And it wasn't until the Shenandoahs that I said, hey guys, I need to go sleep by myself. I need to go camp by myself. I need some alone time.
Why, that's interesting. No, why was that then? Why did you feel that need? Were they restricting your hike?
No, they were a good part of my hike. But I'm so used to hiking and backpacking alone. And so it was so nice to have people to share those moments with. But it did come to a point where I just needed to be by myself and have that reset of alone time in the woods where I find it.
And did you enjoy that more by yourself?
They're both good. People being around and being by myself. I do think I lean towards more of being alone. I do enjoy that a lot. My hike from basically New Jersey on, I was pretty solo, and that was a whole different experience than from when I was hiking with the trail family, and both were great. But I do enjoy kind of being off on my own, doing my own thing.
I love this, that many of and I've noticed this recently at a lot of my interviews, that people have two separate hikes within one hike, don't they often? This thing about being careful about, not careful, but having to think of what other people want.
Yeah.
And if you're by yourself, you don't have to give a crap what anybody else wants, do you? Because you can wake up that morning and say, do you know what? I think I'll hang about in the woods today. Just stay there, can't you, if you want to? You don't have to, but you can do whatever you like, can't you?
Yeah, you have a lot more freedom when you're by yourself and you're not relying on or affecting somebody else's hike.
Sure. And being in your mid-30s, did you have a partner at the time who thought anything of your hike or what?
Okay, so in 2020 when I started, yes. And then when I got off because of COVID and everything happening and finally decided I was just going to go again in 2021, he said, no, you're not. I said goodbye.
That's the spirit.
Yep. And then no partner after that, just by myself, and then took off on 2021 and went again.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that in a minute.
Okay.
So how different is day hiking from backpacking a week or more in the woods? Did it feel particularly different to you, or did you translate your day hikes in the Smokies into the Appalachian Trail quite easily?
I think it translates pretty good because I was used to doing 2 or 3 day backpacking trips along with the day hiking, and the AT is really just 2 or 3 day backpacking trips with a stop in town, resupply, and go again.
Do you know what? That is the best lesson people need to learn, by the way. And I learned that on the very first day in 2014. Someone said that to me. Said, look at it as 3 or 4 day hikes between stops in town. And it just resets your mind entirely, doesn't it?
That's all it is. And you just click along and just keep going.
And what about the gear? Was the gear different for backpacking, or did you have to sort of increase your gear? Or because frankly, if you go out in the day and you've got bad gear, who cares? At the end of the day, you go back home, gotcha.
Right.
But if you go out in the woods and something sucks, 4 or 5 days of it sucking won't be good.
Yeah, I pieced together gear over time in my smaller backpacking trips and kind of learned what works for me and what doesn't. But yeah, my day trip gear is much different than my backpacking gear. But my backpacking gear for the AT is the exact same backpacking gear I use for smaller trips.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, good. And the majority, we've talked about the majority of the hikers on the AT being either in their 20s or their 60s. How easy was it for you in your mid-30s to fit into that camaraderie on the trail? I mean, personally, I never had a problem hiking with an 18-year-old or an 80-year-old.
Right.
Didn't really bother me. But there is definitely a difference, isn't there, how people necessarily approach you?
Oh, yeah. It definitely felt like there was a lot of younger people out there, and I didn't quite fit in with them so much because it's more of the college age drinking thing, and that's not really my style.
Don't you drink?
I don't drink beer, which I found out on the AT anymore.
Oh dear.
That was the whole thing in Franklin. But
Oh, whoa, 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 whoa! You can't pass over that. Go on
well,
then.
okay, so I was in Franklin for St. Patrick's Day, and
Oh,
so of
bad luck.
course I went to the Lazy Hiker. I had my green beer, and then got back to the hostel, and my whole body just swelled up like ridiculous amounts. And I was like, okay, I'm not drinking beer anymore. And for the most part, no, I didn't drink along the trail. I was so afraid to ruin something like on my body.
I know what you mean there, but something I learned in 2019 that wasn't there in 2014 was the amount of breweries up and down the trail.
There's a lot. If you love
You
beer,
could do a
man,
pub
it's
crawl.
a good.
You could do a pub crawl all the way up the trail.
Seriously.
It's remarkable, yeah. So you made the commitment and you headed out in 2020. When did you actually start in 2020?
In 2020, I started February 29th. I thought that'd be a fun day, leap year day.
Of course, nice, yeah, good one.
And I don't remember what day exactly it was that I ended up coming off, but it was the day before the Smokies closed. I had plans to come off that day for a 0 day in Knoxville, where I'm from, and my friend picked me up, and the plan was to come back the day after, and it was that very next day that they closed the Smokies down.
But a lot of people just didn't get off. So
Right.
you were obviously abiding by the rules or whatever they were, or you just couldn't get the Smokies. Did you think of going beyond the Smokies and carrying on from there?
I went back and forth with all kinds of ideas. I thought, well, give me a few weeks. I'll wait it out. Surely this will, blow over.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. Then I
Everybody
thought,
that. Yeah.
well, I'll just do southbound hike and I'll finish in Fontana. And then that didn't happen. I went back to work. And then I just decided, you know what, this gives me another year to save up more money. I'll just do it next year.
See, this is the intelligence of a 36-year-old, by the way. Yeah, an 18-year-old might not have done that. So that's good. That was pretty useful for you.
Yeah.
And so what were those early miles like? What did it feel like to be, because you actually hiked to Fontana, you said, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what were those miles like? That's a good chunk of mileage. So
Yeah.
you'd got used to being on the trail. You'd got into the rhythm of your hike and so on. How did you cope with those early miles?
The second time or the first time?
I mean, this is the first time.
The first time, it was like just an absolute dream come true. Although the first few days I was sick and coughing and just dying, I ended up
COVID.
Honestly, it could have been. I actually had to come off of trail, go to the doctor. They said I had pneumonia because I had
blimey.
cracking in my lungs. And so they were like, you need to take a few days off. I took a few days off and then went back out and kept going. And it was just like, I'm so happy to be here.
So hang on. So if you hadn't got off then with the pneumonia, you probably would have got past Fontana Dam and into the Smokies.
I would have been in the Smokies when they closed it.
At that point, would you have come off, do you think?
If I was in the Smokies and they called for hikers to get off the trail in the Smokies, I would have, because
Right.
that is my local park.
Of course, that's fair enough, yeah.
I volunteer there sometimes with trail work, and it's just, I feel like I have to be a good steward of that park because I frequent it so much.
Bless you. That's a really nice answer, by the way. And when you were on the trail, obviously, if you started 29th of February, great day to start, then it all started about 2 weeks after that. But you started to hear news. Was it filtering through to you, or did you just turn up at Fontana Dam and they said you can't go in the Smokies?
No, we knew, we were hearing about it. And then when the ATC called for hikers to get off the trail, we kept going. I didn't want to get off. Right. And then we knew it was really getting bad because in Franklin, resupply was terrible. We went to Walmart and everything was gone. Even the tuna packets and the things that, hikers would eat, that was all gone.
So did you think you'd be back? Because, I remember people getting off at the time thinking, oh, this is going to blow over in 10 minutes, or a couple of days, whatever. Did you expect it to blow over and you'd be back in a couple of weeks? Or
I really did. I figured, it was kind of a swine flu scare or something, and that it wouldn't be that big of a deal. And in a few weeks, everything would be good to go. But that clearly wasn't the case.
Surely not, no.
Yeah.
And by then, of course, you've been on the trail long enough to have formed bonds. You'd got into the feral lifestyle, which is something that I found that a lot of the women really loved the feral lifestyle, which is kind of weird to me. How easy was it when you went back home to get back into life?
So coming off in 2020, I was devastated, especially when I realized I wasn't going back. Just absolutely not in a good place. I was very upset. I felt like I had worked so hard to get there and it was taken away from me off of something I couldn't control. It wasn't something I did or a decision I made. So I was devastated, but I have a good support of friends here who, cheered me on, and they're like, you'll get back out there, and they took care of me. So
you went back on in 2021 and
started over.
Exactly. Remarkably to me, you went back to the beginning. Why on earth did you do that? Because you didn't need to, did you? You could have got it done in the year. Was it important to you? And because of 2020, were you nervous still about what might be going on?
No. At that point, when I just started over and I decided to do the approach trail this time, because I didn't do it the first time, the way I looked at it was that first section in 2020 was a very nice shakedown hike. And I just figured, what's 164 miles in a 2,000
Once again,
mile?
wisdom of a 36-year-old, by the way.
Yeah, just like what's a couple weeks over a 6-month adventure? Just go again.
So you got back on. You did that lovely. The whole of the trail breaks down into all these different chunks, obviously, and that first chunk leaves you at Fontana Dam, and then you get ready for the smokers and so on. It must have been quite emotional, I suspect, on that walk down into Fontana Dam and then across the bridge, thinking, "They can stop me. Can I get in the smoking?" Yeah. What was it like? What was it like for you?
I danced across the entire bridge going across.
Fantastic!
It was one of the most special moments, maybe even rivaled to summiting Katahdin, walking across the dam. I was so happy. I was so elated. I had my trail family was there with me. They're just cracking up because I said, if I get across, I am dancing the whole way, and that is not a short dam. So
it's not, is it?
About halfway through, I was like, "Well, this was a mistake, but I'm still going."
it's a big old dance. And when we spoke before, you told me that you're normally quite an introverted person. Yeah, you hiked a long way. You said I think it was about 800 miles with a couple of guys. Yes. How did that suit your introversion? Sorry, I'm just interrupt for a second. No. So. And was that introversion the reason you then wanted to be by yourself?
I think that's what pulled me away. That's me just, it helps that during the day we kind of hike by ourselves. And then it's just at night when everybody kind of gets together. The two guys I was hiking with are very awesome guys. Maverick, and he's an older gentleman. He's 64 at the time. And then,
he's a youngster. What are you talking about?
He's awesome. And Cheese, who is also just amazing. He's my age. Also an introvert.
Cheese.
So
African Cheese, fantastic names.
Dr. Cheese, to be precise.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry,
Doc. They're great guys. I just, being that as introverted as I am, and Cheese is as well, but Maverick is a little more outgoing. And sometimes it was just, he was a lot for me. And I was like, okay, I got to go, but I'll see you in a little bit.
Isn't he the one who's going to Scotland with you to hike the West Highland Way?
Yes, if we can make it work.
Because it's only about 8 or 9 days, isn't it? That's why.
Yeah. Like, come on, Maverick, let's go. Maverick and I actually hiked together and around each other all the way to New Jersey. That's when we split off.
Nice. And you had a couple of animal encounters you told me about as well. Tell me about your bear encounter, which was quite good fun.
The bear, I was stealth camping alone by this creek and eating my breakfast in the morning, and I heard this noise, and I peeked out under my tarp, and the bear was just in camp walking up to me like he wanted some of my breakfast too. So I had to get up and show him away, and he just nonchalantly walked off. He had no fear of me whatsoever. He did.
Did you have fear of him?
No, he wasn't aggressive at all. I could tell. The problem is he is not afraid of humans, which is bad for him.
That is a problem, yes. Yeah.
But he's also not aggressive. He was just waiting for me to leave so that he could see, whatever I left for him, which was nothing. But I shoot him away, and then he came back into camp from another direction, and I had shoot him away again. But I wasn't afraid of him. He wasn't showing any aggression. He was just like,
nice.
I'm here to check out the food that you leave.
And you know what? As you're not afraid, isn't it a wonderful moment to see a bear? in the wild.
Yes.
There's something that is almost otherworldly to me. Same with moose for me as well. Bears, obviously. Snakes, not so much. Can't stand them. But, to see bears in the wild is just remarkable to me.
They're amazing.
Every time I saw one. Yeah, they're fantastic. But your favourite animal encounter was a porcupine.
Yes.
They are ugly buggers. So tell us about that.
So I was, again, stealth camping alone. This is in New Hampshire, just out of Hanover. And in the middle of the night, I heard these noises that I've never heard before. And I was wondering what animal makes this noise. So I peeked out from under my tarp and shining my headlamp, and there were two porcupines wrestling each other. And I was just tickled to death to see that.
Are you sure they were wrestling?
Maybe, I'm not sure. We'll say yes. But I startled them with my headlamp. They realized I was there, and then they shot up and they climbed the tree, like right up that tree. And I had no idea porcupines climb trees. I knew nothing about porcupines. Now I know what they sound like. I know they climb trees. I know they sleep in the trees. And they will throw bark down on you at night.
Because you're in a hammock, aren't you? You're not in a tent.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, and that's an unusual choice because you're a relatively inexperienced hiker, but you've done day hikes and so on. When did you get into hammocks? Was that, or did you never sleep on the ground?
No, my very first night backpacking, when I went my first trip, was in a hammock. I had no tarp. I had nothing. I had a hammock and a backpack and a can of SpaghettiOs. And that's how I did it. And I knew hammocking was the way to go for me. I did sleep on the ground a few times when I brought my dog. Back when she was alive, she did not like sleeping in a hammock. But when she passed or when I was on my own, always in a hammock. And to this day, every night, even not on trail, still in a hammock.
Were there any days when it was difficult to get trees or not?
Not really. Through the whites, I just had to make sure.
The whites would have been tricky, yeah.
I just had to make sure I was down below tree line.
All right.
Yeah, there were a few times I was in not the best hang position, but I was still able to hang.
And you had because you finished in the middle of August, I think, 15th of August, something like that.
August 18th.
18th, okay. You had a lousy summit day, apparently. And tell us about that, because going up in the middle of August should have given you at least a shot of decent weather. So
right.
How bad was it going up there?
Well, we started at around 3 a.m. and it was raining immediately on us.
Yes.
It was wet, socked in, foggy, gross, and it just made it that much more amazing. That the rocks and the way Katahdin is, just the ominous feeling of being socked in like that. You don't really know. I've probably missed out on this. And so eventually I'll make my way back there, but you can't see how high above the world you are.
No.
You just feel, I feel intimate with the mountain when all you can see is right in front of you.
Sure.
It was gross and wet and cold and windy, but it was also amazing and wonderful.
In that case, it must have been a bit of a bloody shock when you got above tree line to see that wall in front of you. You had to climb straight up. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh! I thought this must be the wrong way. But it wasn't. It was straight up.
It was very straight up. They are not kidding. I did expect more rebar, though. I thought there would be more rebar climbing, but there was pretty challenging. But
it was challenging, certainly. But you got there, which is just a wonderful moment. Was it a magical moment? And all those things were. I mean, did you cry at the sign and all that sort of stuff?
I did not cry at the sign. I cried the night I got picked up and back into town. I cried that night, but I didn't cry at the sign. But it all came crashing down on me that night.
Sure. Yeah. And you know what? It's a good crashing down though, isn't it? There's this realization that you've been waking up every day for the last, 160 days, 180 days, whatever it was. And then you don't have to do it tomorrow. You kind of miss that you don't have to do it, but at the same time you think,
I wanted to do it. If I had the time and money, I would have turned around and just hiked back home.
Would you really?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what did hiking the Appalachian Trail do for you? Did it prove anything to you about yourself?
I think it really helped me kind of reset my internal self, and I don't really know how to explain what that means. But
Take a shot.
It really did help me realize that I am okay and I do well on my own and being by myself, and that I don't need a lot to be happy and just being out there doing what I do. It made me realize that I have a wonderful group of friends back home. And just, I was happy to get back to what I'm doing because I love what I do. And I don't know, it helped me kind of find a balance
Sure.
between the hiking life and the real life, or the real world as they call it. And I feel balanced in that now, whereas before I didn't feel balanced. I felt like I had to go out there, I had to do it, and I did it, and I feel like it reset a switch in me that's like, okay, now your life is more balanced.
And is your introversion, did that change?
It may be a little more.
Is it even more so because, you enjoyed being out there by yourself?
I think it is a little more so. I still do very much enjoy being by myself. I work alone. I'm alone all day. I still socialize with, I go out and we do things together with my friends, but I do find peace and solitude, especially on trail, when I'm by myself out there.
Wow. And finishing the trail clearly gave you the appetite. What are you working on? What are you working on your hiking right now? I think it's to do with the Smokies again, isn't it?
Yes, I'm completing all the trails in the Smokies. That's my next goal.
Is it 900 miles of trail?
It's called the Smokies 900. I think technically there's about 800 miles open of open trail, but by the time you get done doing out and backs and some of the trails, you have to hike out one way and back the other. It's not like a linear hike. So you end up doing way more than the 800.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it the most inefficient way possible.
I actually met a woman at Trail Days this last week called Nancy East, who just completed the fastest known time on the Smokies 400, which is remarkable.
I read her book.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Fantastic. So you're heading over to Scotland. Are you going to do any other really long distance trails?
Really long distance are a few years ahead. Okay. I did make an agreement with my bosses that I wouldn't take off again for 6 months for a couple more years. I just have smaller ones planned. The Scotland, doing that next year. I'm doing the Foothills Trails in South Carolina in September. Right. But that's only 77 miles, I think. So,
well, when you do head over to Scotland with Maverick, let me know and I'll tell people how well you do, how much you enjoy it. Because, I think I've done the Camino, which is more of a walk than a hike, and I've done the Appalachian Trail, obviously, and that obviously is a hike. I think the Scottish one's more of a hike than a walk. And there are bits in there that think, oh my God, that was tougher than I thought. So, it's enough to test you. So, I think I'd enjoy it as well. But, I really appreciate you coming on the show. You are... You're an interesting person to talk to, particularly when I was writing these notes up, I thought, I must ask her about that. So, that was good. But, thanks for talking to us, and we'll catch up again soon, okay?
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Cheers then.
Bye.
Bye. What a great attitude Natisha has. She abided by the ATC's request not to go into the Smokies in 2020 because she felt that it was her park and that she needed to be a good steward of the park. Nice. Even then, she eventually reframed that 2020 adventure as a good shakedown hike for a 2021 thru-hike. Pretty cool, eh? Now, because my stomach has started to rumble, I'm trying not to catch it in the microphone. I'm going to skip over thanking our donors individually this week, but I will do a full roundup next week. That said, I hope you all know how much your support means to me. I believe I mentioned that I caught up with Kira, Brittany and Ryan at Trail Days last week. In fact, I had a drink with them. Well, 3 have become 2, and I was intending to speak with the 2 women this morning. However, just as I was about to call, Ryan texted me that they had no cell service. So, thinking on my feet, I thought I'd catch up with him to see what happened to him. Here's Ryan.
Hello.
Hey Ryan, Steve Adams, how are you?
Doing well, how are you?
You're not doing well.
Well, yeah.
I'm calling you again. Please don't tell me you're back in the basement.
Not currently, but yes, I'm back in the basement.
So last time I saw you was at Trail Days, and I was due to be speaking with Kira and Brittany this morning because I understood you got off the trail. So I know you hadn't been back on. Tell me what happened.
Yeah, so I had been off for 2 weeks before Trail Days.
Sure.
And we were just going to skip ahead at trail days and go northbound from trail days. And then, after everything was said and finished, just southbound from Damascus, because it's just an easy place for us to hop to real quick.
Sure.
So I spent from Damascus to Massey Gap, which is Grayson Highlands.
Sure.
And
so I saw you in some pictures. So I knew you were there. And yeah. So what was that like? How did you feel? Because you had a problem with your knee, or
with my knee.
Yeah.
That's what's been the issue. I have patellar tendonitis.
Okay.
And so from Damascus, we actually took the Creeper Trail all the way up as far as we could. So it was like a day and a half, I think it was, of the Creeper Trail. And it's because we were taking it real easy because of my knee.
Right.
And man, I was feeling great, but it was all uphill from there,
Sure.
So, and it's the downhills that are giving me issues.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, so it was like, I'm feeling great. Everything's beautiful. We had some great weather. It got pretty warm one day.
It looked glorious there. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty warm and a little bit of rain on the first day. But I mean, other than that, it was absolutely gorgeous out there.
Sure.
And so far of the parts of the A2 that I've done, that was my favorite part. But pretty much as soon as we got to I can't remember, one of those peaks or lookouts. It's called something Rock. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Is it Eagle Rock?
Much
is it Eagle Rock?
It might be.
Yeah.
So from Eagle Rock, you start heading downhill, and a mile or two into the downhill, my knee starts hurting, and we had ups and downs that whole day. And then that night heading into camp, I was having the pains like I had been having, after I got off at the Smokies.
Sure.
And it was like, okay, this isn't as bad as it was. So, but the next day is when it got real bad again, to the point where I was limping, the whole downhill, uphill, flat, everything.
So how did you wake up that next morning? I mean, after days hiking anyway, you were always a bit achy and tired and so on. Did you feel confident going to bed that night, or were you getting a bit nervous about it?
I was getting a bit nervous, but I told Sniffles before we went to bed, I was like, yeah, I'm having pain, but if this is as bad as it's going to be, I can push through it.
Right.
And then see how it gets. I was feeling pretty hopeful, to be honest.
Okay. So I'm guessing you did the ibuprofen and all that sort of thing, and that had no effect on it, or because that's what kept my knees just about okay on the trail, was ibuprofen, but that just wasn't working for you at all?
No. So, I mean, I have a prescription of ibuprofen, right. So I'm taking 500 milligrams a day.
Wow.
And pain medicine on top of that. And then wearing the knee brace, stretching out that night I stretched it out 3 times, or throughout that day.
Yeah. The
day before I got off, stretched it out 3 times. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I'm sitting there stretching it out.
So where did you make the decision to get off then?
Pretty much halfway to Massey Gap from Elk Garden.
Right.
So right around the 500 mile mark range that's when it was starting to hurt really bad. I'm wincing in pain with every step.
How dispiriting. So what was the girl's reaction to this? You made the decision, obviously. You said, I'm going to leave. Well, firstly, I presume you felt devastated by it. How did the girls react?
I don't know if it really hit them when I told them. And I haven't completely and 100%, said I'm getting totally off trail.
Right. Dear me.
Because I'm not ready to give up, and I'm scheduling. I have a doctor's appointment scheduled, and see if he thinks a cortisone shot is would help at all, or if it's just going to be 2 weeks of hiking good and then I'm going to get my heart broken again,
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I don't really, of course they're upset. They want to hang out with me and they want me to be out there to experience it with them. But until Brittany, at least until like last night, she's out on trail and she calls me and she's having a pretty rough time without me being there. We're partners in crime, so
Sure.
it's hard for us to be apart.
It's testing. There's no question about it. It tests all the emotions when you're out there. And did I think we probably talked about it when we had our original interviews. Did you have that discussion before or even during the hike about what would happen if one of you did go home?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different between, Kara and then me and Brittany.
Of course, yes.
But me and Brittany, we said, I think we'd really just cross that bridge when we get there. And I know both of us would encourage the other one to keep on going. Like
right.
I've told Brittany, please keep on going. And she's felt guilty. And I want you to do this for you. And now we wanted to do this together, but it's at the end of the day, it's for you. It's not for us.
Yes.
And I know she would feel the same way if it was the other way around.
Yeah. So what is the plan now? You're seeing a doctor, and what's the doctor? They're giving you exercises and so on. And are you planning to actually get back on at some stage soon?
Yeah, I saw this same doctor 2 weeks ago, and
sure.
he gave me the exercises to do, and I've been doing those every day.
Uh-huh.
I did those every day for the 2 weeks before I got back on at Damascus, and a different set of exercises before that. And he gave me all the stretches and said, you're going to experience pain, but it's a matter of if you can deal with the pain or not. And then the one thing he said to me was the only thing he couldn't rule out was a meniscus tear. So like, it's nothing with my ACL, MCL, like I don't have stability issues.
Right. Okay.
And without getting an MRI, he can't confirm that it's not my meniscus, and meniscus is something I've torn before.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's too out of the question that that's what it is.
Oh, God, what a bloody nightmare. I feel for you, man. I mean, it must be just horrendous, especially to see the posts that, Kara and Brittany are going to post. But I'm sure you're encouraging them to keep going. And so I hope that works out. I hope obviously, it works out that you can get back. But I appreciate you. Because I was meant to be recording Brittany and Kara this morning. And Ryan, by the way, just so everybody knows, Ryan let me know that they wouldn't make it. They wouldn't be able to make it. They didn't have service or something. So I said, why don't we speak? Can you tell us about what happened to you? And I'm guessing you didn't really want to, but I appreciate you coming on.
No, of course.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you coming on and tell us, and I hope you get back. So just let me know if you go back, and next time we speak, hopefully you'll be out there again.
Yeah, I'll keep you updated, and then I'll have Brittany and Kara give you a call as soon as they can, or a text, see when they could schedule, because I think they'll be close to Atkins very soon. All
right. Well, this is podcast day today. It's Wednesday. It's a podcast day. I'm putting everything together. I like to have everything recorded before Wednesday, but that's the way it goes sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, man. All right. Well, look, good luck, and hopefully we'll speak again soon. Right.
All right. Good talking to you.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.
Blimey, you can hear the disappointment, can't you? When you commit to doing an AT, or indeed any other long distance hike, you kind of put your life on hold for up to 6 or 7 months. If you recall, Ryan was so looking forward to this, and leaving your girlfriend and your aunt out there must be tough. Hope he's able to join them again sometime soon. Another person who expected to be out there this year is Sarah Fox, but she's not. Let's hear what happened to her. Here's Sarah. Oh, by the way, Sarah's dog made a bit of a fuss in this interview. He did not take too kindly to being chucked out of the room while Sarah was talking to the computer. I tried to edit some of it out, but that's what you're going to hear. Here she is. So, some of you may have wondered why we haven't heard much, but hardly at all, in fact, from Sarah Fox. Firstly, hey Sarah, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you.
And And the reason we haven't heard from Sarah much, because we heard from her just before she was due to go out on trail. What was your start date? Was it April sometime?
April 15th.
April 15th. And so she was all ready to go, and then suddenly you weren't. So what happened?
Yeah, so I was dealing with a small amount of pain, and I think a lot of women can really understand that on a monthly basis we experience some amount of pain.
Oh, right.
But it gets to a point sometimes where you realize something might be wrong. And it was something I was working with my doctor, but nothing extremely serious up until the point about 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave. I would say probably right after we talked, where I was in a situation where I needed to have surgery. And I know that with a lot of hikers,
Sarah loves dogs, by the way. You probably remember that. That was a wolf. That was a wolf in the background. Yeah, sorry, Karen.
A lot of hikers, we're used to experiencing some amount of pain and discomfort while we're out on the trail. Sure. And I think there's always a question of at what point do you push through that and keep going and keep moving on with your plans, and when do you have to postpone?
Oh my
and
gosh.
Unfortunately, I was in a situation where if I was out on the trail and my situation turned into an emergency, which it could have, I would have needed emergency surgery, and it could be a life-threatening situation.
Totally the right decision to make then. And yeah, what would have happened? Could it literally have been a life-threatening situation had you gone out there?
It could have, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I think that we've actually had some other hikers who've experienced situations similar to mine that are women. What was wrong with me is that, and I have no issue sharing, is that they found that I had an ovarian cyst that was about the size of a baseball. And when you have one of those that is of that size, the risk is that it could rupture or it could twist.
Sure.
And those things are more likely to happen during strenuous exercise. And if that occurs, it really is a life-threatening situation where you have to have immediate surgery. And there was actually a female hiker, I'm not sure if it was last year or the year previously, that had a similar situation out on trail, where she ended up having to hike 5 or 6 miles to get to the nearest emergency room. And I really had to think about, is that a situation I want to potentially put myself in?
Sure.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of us feel some amount of just disappointment and even potentially shame when changing your plans after telling so many people what you're going to do. But your health always comes first.
No, Sarah, surely not. Absolutely no. No, you're an adult. You make decisions that are best for you, not best for what anybody else thinks. Who gives a crap what anybody else thinks?
For sure.
You've invested a lot of time and effort and money, I'm sure, into putting this together. But always your health comes first. So how did you feel? Was it that disappointing, or do you just think, well, I've done the right thing for myself and we'll just move forward from here?
I think there was a lot of mixed feelings. I knew I was making the right decision for myself, like I said, following my doctor's advice and just knowing I didn't want to put myself in that emergency situation. But deep down, it was really disappointing that I couldn't follow through with a plan that I've set for myself, for months.
Yeah. But you were doing a flip-flop anyway, weren't you? Mm-hmm. So, it's not too late, don't you?
Right. No, for sure. So actually right now I'm kind of toying with the idea of getting out on the trail sometime in the fall. Right. A lot of that's going to just depend on,
Sure.
how I'm feeling. This might end up being a 2023 journey that I take.
Sure.
But definitely planning for the future and being optimistic. And, I read about how there's some hikers out there right now that are pushing through injuries, and that's really commendable. But also want to make sure people understand, there's a certain point where you just have to make that tough decision to, get off trail, and that's okay.
Yeah. There are injuries and there are injuries, and so, if you've got a bad leg one day, something else in your upper part of your body will take over and hurt you more the next day. But that's okay. You can walk through that sort of stuff. What you've said, it's unlikely you could walk through that, because you're right. It is incredibly strenuous sometimes, and you could find yourself in a very difficult area having a real problem, couldn't you? So
right,
I think obviously you made the right decision. So, you don't feel well enough to go out now, I presume.
No, I'm still healing. I'm kind of getting back into some moderate to light exercise.
Right.
As a dog trainer, I'm used to potentially walking 7 to 10 miles a day with the animals I work with.
Right.
And I'm not even up to that point right now.
Okay.
So,
oh, wow.
And also adding that
you probably
extra...
tend to do that on the flat as well, don't you?
Right. Yeah. I live in a quite urban environment, so not a lot of hills out here. And also adding that extra piece of having a pack, obviously that adds a lot of strain. So, still working myself up to feeling comfortable getting back out there, focusing a lot on car camping with my family right now, as the Michigan weather allows it. So, purchasing some new equipment, because right now all we have is backpacking gear. But just enjoying, the time I have right now and, staying positive.
Okay. Well, look, let me know if you go back on, because, you could still be part of the class of 2022 in August. You never know. So let's just see how you feel and how you get better. And I really appreciate you coming on the show and not only telling us, but you're kind of delivering a bit of a warning to people not to deceive themselves when they're out there, really, aren't you? If you're not feeling great and there's potential issues, you need to address those before you push through something which may not be push throughable, if you know what I mean.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Sarah. I appreciate you talking to us. And, best luck in your healing and best luck getting out on the trail.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.
She made the absolute correct decision, didn't she? I'm glad she came on and told us what happened. You really can't ignore your body. Just know this. The AT will stress your body far more than you could ever imagine. Sarah put her health first, and as she said, her time may have to be 2023. So, 2 class members not on the trail. But as I said I would last year, we're now catching up with somebody who is about to get back on the trail. Let's see what Katie Westling has coming up. So, a year late, we're back on with Katie.
Yay,
hey, Katie, how are you?
Yay, I'm good, Steve.
Good. You look well, actually. So, actually, Katie's just told me that she's thinking of shaving her head for the trail this year. So, let's see what works out in those pictures.
See if it happens.
Yeah. So, Katie, let's catch new listeners up. Where did you get to last year, and what is there still to do?
Oh, wow. So, before it was all over, I was all over the place. I started at Springer Mountain last March 9th.
That's pretty traditional, yep.
Yeah, and it was my intention to have it just be a traditional northbound thru hike. That's what my goal was. And about 4 weeks in, I developed a stress fracture in my knee, and then had to get off for a month. So ended up getting off at Allen Gap in North Carolina.
Sure.
And so after a month, I got back on doing slack packing through Shenandoah National Park just to get my body rehabilitated and back into it.
Yeah, that was a good choice, I think, to get back there.
I think so. I think so. And I just kept going north, got up to Manchester Center, Vermont, and then made the decision, it was starting to, it was getting late in August, and I felt it would be wiser for me to jump up to Katahdin and then head south. So I summited Katahdin and then flipped.
Oh, hang on. So you left Vermont and went straight to Katahdin, or did you do the 100-mile wilderness first?
No, I straight to Katahdin and then south through, from Vermont, and then south through the 100-mile wilderness, which I loved.
Yes, I like.
And made it all the way through Maine and through the Wildcats in New Hampshire.
You had a tough time in the Wildcats, I seem to remember.
Well, because I did it all in one day,
yes.
Which was
schoolboy
crazy.
or schoolgirl error in your case.
That's right. I don't know what possessed me, but it was a 21-mile slack pack that took many hours and finishing after dark. And
although you did know, to be fair, you knew it was going to be after dark, didn't you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. But it still was, I consider, probably the craziest thing I did on the trail. And oh, well, what can I say? So the forecast for the following week, for the next day and the following week, was up on the ridges was 50-mile-an-hour winds and
nice.
Freezing rain. So I just thought, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, winning combination, yeah.
First of all, I didn't have the gear on me to do that. And I just felt like it was a dangerous situation, and I wasn't ready for that. Sure. So I jumped down to Lyme, New Hampshire, and then hiked through Vermont, to Clarendon Gorge, Vermont. So I have bits and pieces to fill in. I have 100 miles in New Hampshire, all of Southern Virginia, and then 2 30-mile sections, one in North Carolina and one in Vermont that I have to finish. So what are you going to do?
You're going to try to do that all this year?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to do it this summer. I have to get it done this summer.
This is one trip, is it? You're going to wherever you are. So what's the plan first? Where are you going to start?
So I'm going to go fill in the 30-mile section in North Carolina, starting on the 6th. I'll leave Allen Gap and hike to Sam's Gap. It's 30 miles, but I'm going to give myself like 5 to 6 days.
Sure.
Because I'm really not at the level of fitness I was at. You're
not.
You're right. I have been walking and trying to stay fit, but certainly it's not what 1,700 miles did to me.
No, I'm sure you're right. So you've done about 1,700 miles altogether so far, right?
Close. I think it's like 1,680, something like that.
So have you changed up your kit at all since you went last time, or have you got pretty much the same stuff?
Really, the only thing I've changed out are my hiking sticks, and it's because I fell on them so many times that one is completely bent, and so I just decided, well, I'll get a new one.
Funny enough, I think I mentioned this the other day. When I got to Monson in in Maine, going north, before I went into the 100-mile wilderness, I didn't need to do this, but I bought some brand new socks. And it was because I just wanted something new on me. Everything was old and tatty on me. So, and I wondered whether you would sort of get a new shirt or something like that.
I did get a new shirt.
Oh, you got new clothes.
I did get a new buff with the AT on it.
Okay. Good to know.
I bought a new pair of shoes for New Hampshire. So I still have a couple of shoes that I've worn already, and I'll do that for the all the other part.
I know from your Facebook you've been seeing your family and so on. Are they up with you? Are they happy with you going back, or they hoping that you're home for good?
They have just resigned themselves to me. So no, totally supportive.
Good.
I really am grateful for that.
That's good. And what about logistics? Are you going to, because and I'm not sure what the timing's like this time of year. Obviously most things are open, but most people now should probably be through North Carolina, shouldn't they?
Right. So I feel like there's so many section hikers that I feel like I will be out there, and I'm going to have my car for North Carolina. So I'll leave it at a hostel somewhere and get a shuttle and then just have them pick me up at the end of the hike. And then I'm driving to Damascus and going to reconnect with a couple of friends and see them, and then just going to take off, and my daughter's going to come and get my car, and I'm going to just head north.
So you've done, where will your finish be, do you think? It will be somewhere in Vermont, will it? No, somewhere in New Hampshire.
No, I think I'm going to go northbound through from Lyme to Pinkham Notch.
Okay.
Pinkham Notch was where I got off and then shuttled to Lyme. So
you haven't done Franconia Ridge, have you?
Mm-mm.
Oh, dear. You're going to love that.
I know.
I hope you got some miles on your legs by the time you get there, but you are going to bloody love that. It is just amazing. Right.
That's kind of why I'm doing it this way, going up through Virginia, and then I'll do the little patch in Vermont, and then head up to New Hampshire.
Cool.
So,
That's very cool. Well, look, we're going to, unlike the rest of the class of 2022, we're actually going to keep up with you every week. So in the same way we did last year, this is just an extension of the class of 2021, which was you. All right. So you're starting on the 6th. So text me when you've got some adventures and we'll get on the phone and we'll talk. Okay.
All right. Sounds great, Steve.
All right then.
All right.
Cheers then.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
I love you to hear from Katie again. She isn't going to find it easy, but at least she knows what she's letting herself in for, doesn't she? As I said, we'll be catching up with her again, quite independently of our class of 2022, as she fills in the gaps. Finally today, George Stefanos' Then the Hail Came, and George and his buddy are coming into the NOC. It's funny, even though George did this 40 years ago, I'm loving hearing his experiences that were pretty similar to mine in many of the places I visited as well. Now, let's begin that prep. Ugh. I'll see you next week. Chapter 2. Cold Carolina Rain. Franklin, North Carolina to Fontana Dam, North Carolina. Thursday, the 12th of May, 1983, mile 125.7. Walking away from the comforts of Franklin was rather difficult. Before leaving, I could not resist paying one more visit to the talking vending machine. Because I did not have the exact coins this time, he thoughtfully reminded me not to forget my change when the transaction was completed. Then he thanked me again. De nada, amigo. By the time we had hitched a ride back to the Appalachian Trail and begun hiking, it was 1:30 in the afternoon. A big thunderstorm had rocked Franklin late last night, and the threat of more rain persisted throughout today. Thus, we were determined to stay in a shelter tonight. Our problem was that the next two AT shelters were, respectively, 4 miles and 16 miles up the trail. Our recent first taste of big mileage had whetted our appetites for more. Yesterday's hike had been cut short after 9 miles by an unplanned night in town. We had both badly needed that interlude, but how could we settle for a mere 13-mile cumulative total from 2 days of hiking? 4 miles seemed a pitiful goal upon which to set our sights today. On the other hand, in just 7.5 hours, the last glimmers of twilight would flicker out. The 16.2-mile hike to Cold Spring Shelter was only 3.5 miles shorter than what we had covered on Tuesday over an entire day, our greatest day. Nevertheless, not all decisions are made rationally. I walked non-stop for 10 miles. The first 6 were on a stretch of pleasant but uneventful connecting trail similar to the tail end of yesterday's hike. Along the way, I crossed a low point of the ridge crest known as Swinging Lick Gap. I'm sorry, but I cannot touch this one. It's too easy. You're welcome to write your own punchline. I also wandered a little along the wooded crest of a 5,000-footer called Silas Bald before descending to cross a narrow strip of state road in Wire Gap. This mountain pass marked the onset of a long climb up to the summit of Wire Bald, which was the grueling climax of the 10-mile grind. Along the crest, the AT joined a paved road which had also ascended from Wire Gap. The hard surface was not kind to my feet, which had been pounded by my non-stop marathon. The soles were twin masses of contusions, not yet recovered from the effects of the 19.7-mile hike 2 days earlier, and the continually abraded wound on my right foot was a hunk of raw hamburger. I have experimented with numerous combinations of moleskin, band-aids and adhesive tape in an attempt to discover a dressing which will keep the wound covered for more than 5 minutes of hiking. Nothing works. Once the leather of the boot begins scraping against it and the mud and water start working in, everything dissolves rather quickly. The road led to a parking area near the summit, next to an observation tower which featured a set of latrines, a rare find in these primitively occluded southern forests of the Appalachian Trail, and a sweep of mountain panorama from the Blue Ridge to the Smokies. I sat down at the top of the tower, absorbing the views and attempting to remember why a 16-mile afternoon had seemed like such a great idea a few hours earlier. I resumed hiking after but a 10-minute rest, once I had discovered that my battered feet throbbed much more painfully when I was offered them. I had abused them so thoroughly recently that they had become desensitized while walking. As I went along, the pain faded to a dull ache, but I knew it would return once I had stopped for the night. As the days have drifted past, I've been gradually perfecting a method of turning off my mind to the complaints of my body and just sort of cruising along on autopilot. The final 6 miles of today's hike were nothing more than a hazy blur of fatigue. I can barely remember anything of the trail past Wirebald until I reached the stubbly crest of a ridge crisscrossed by logging roads 4 miles later. From there, the Appalachian Trail descended for almost a mile through luxuriant rhododendron thickets, reminiscent of that portion of the Blue Ridge between Muskrat Creek and Carter Gap. I traversed a swathe of beautiful, savage-looking rainforest in a lonesome valley surrounding a stream which the AT crossed on a log footbridge. In the deepening twilight, I stumbled across a wide, grassy meadow carpeting a mountain pass called Burning Town Gap in a demented, rubber-legged race with nightfall. The final 1¼ miles to Cold Spring Shelter were all climb, and a fairly substantial one. During that last stretch, had my legs possessed the strength, they would have been kicking me in the butt for what I had done to them. Although dazed with exhaustion, thanks to frequent brief standing rests, I made it to the shelter as the last feeble glimmerings of twilight flickered out. Unlike most AT shelters, which are situated beside the path or often side trails, Cold Spring sits directly in the middle of the wide old woods road which the Appalachian Trail follows over Copper Bald. It is high up in the mountainside, near the 5,000-foot elevation contour, about 20 feet below a point on the ridgeline not far from the summit. Dave had pulled well ahead of me during the final few miles, so he was already here. Too tired to fix dinner, he was laying atop his sleeping bag, moaning and groaning. I spread out my sleeping bag, peeled off my boots and socks, and lay down to add my own accompaniment to the chorus. We lay back for 15 minutes, laughing about what complete jerks we were in our coherent moments between whimpers. I finally forced myself to sit up long enough to fix myself a cold dinner of crackers, cheese and Pop-Tarts. I stood up one more time to hang my food from the roof and collapsed gratefully back onto my sleeping bag. Although my legs are completely spent and my feet are certified disaster areas, I feel fine. The past 3 days have completely turned the tide of this adventure. The night in Franklin restored my soul, and the solid food I got there renewed my body. The 2 long hikes sandwiched around that day are beacons of light in a long, dark, tempestuous night of self-doubt, a glimmer of hope for this hopeless quest. Friday the 13th of May 1983, mile 136.5, Wesser. We were far from lonely in Cold Spring Shelter last night. We were visited by a creature which Dave, after momentarily catching it in the beam of his flashlight, declared to be the biggest and ugliest mouse he had ever seen. Dave said Mickey was bald-headed and possessed a huge potbelly. The rampaging rodent rocketed around the shelter all night, waking us up numerous times. In the middle of the night, Dave killed an enormous cockroach who was attempting to join him in his sleeping bag. Earlier, I had been awoken from a sound sleep by something struggling valiantly to bite a large chunk out of my thumb. I never did discover the identity of that assailant. Needless to say, Dave and I slept in late this morning. After finally awakening, we dawdled shamelessly as we limped through our preparations for the day's hike. As a result, at about 9:30, we found ourselves surrounded by a hyperactive horde of 7th and 8th graders from a local school. They were all congregating at our shelter, waiting for their teachers to catch up to them before beginning the next leg of their hike. Dave began cracking good-natured hillbilly jokes, at which I tried very hard, but unsuccessfully, not to laugh. When Dave brought my attention to 5 or 6 boys decked out in imitation Army jungle camouflage fatigues and baseball caps which read Green Berets, I finally had to let go. Eventually, their teachers arrived, and the group began to move out about 15 minutes before our own 10 o'clock departure. Once Dave and I hit the trail, we caught up to them fairly quickly. We soon found ourselves walking directly behind the Green Berets, who were forming the group's rearguard. One of the boys turned towards another and said, "Hey, Jethro." Smiling, I turned to Dave and silently mouthed the question, "Jethro?" He grinned wickedly and began to sing the Ballad of Jed Clampett from the television show The Beverly Hillbillies. We walked along, giggling like kids. We got into a conversation with the Green Berets, during which one boy kept calling Dave Dude. Dave was amused by that nickname, but also fairly irritated. He repeatedly grumbled to me, "I hate the name Dude." So from now on, Dave calls me Bat, and I call him Dude. The group was extremely large and had spread out over a considerable length of trail. It took us a half hour to pass through the entire formation. They were a cheerful and friendly bunch with a delightful sense of humour. Dave and I were also feeling rather silly today. I don't think we stopped laughing once. The Appalachian Trail was a gently graded path, meandering along wooded mountainsides, avoiding the summits of Tellico, Black and Rocky Balds, but touching their ridge crests occasionally. After a long descent into Tellico Gap, it crossed a gravel road amidst a dense cedar forest and began to climb Wesser Bald. Dave and I had hiked about 5 miles when we reached the quarter-mile side trail to Wesser Bald's fire tower. It was old and half-collapsed, but the 360-degree vistas of shadow mountains and fog-shrouded valleys were visible through the haze from the top. The air was almost completely saturated with moisture. I could not understand how the atmosphere could hold so much water. Fortunately, the rain held off, although the afternoon remained oppressively muggy. The trail down from the summit of Wesser Bald into the town was rugged and difficult. The AT repeatedly ascended and descended over a series of abrupt knobs along the crest of a long spur ridge. There were a couple of nice viewpoints through the trees and an exceptional overlook of the Nantahala River Valley from a rocky outcrop just before the final plunge off of the ridge. This last portion was long and steep, scrambling down a series of awkwardly placed stone steps. At 3:30 p.m. we broke out of the woods into a breezy little clearing. There we found the A. Rufus Morgan shelter. Located only 0.8 of a mile from Wesser, it made a convenient spot at which to spend the night. Our original plans had included obtaining a motel room in Wesser itself, but our unscheduled stop, a mere 2 days ago in Franklin, called for a modification of plans. We laid out our gear, settled in and made dinner. At about 4:30, the massive thunderstorm which had been brewing all day finally struck. It spent itself rather quickly though, and by 6 o'clock we had hung up our food out of the reach of small animals and were striding down into Wesser for a brief visit. Heading north from Springer Mountain, Wesser, North Carolina, is the first trail town through which the Appalachian Trail actually passes. This corner of town is a narrow strip along the floor of the deep, heavily wooded, steep-walled gorge which the Nantahala River scours through the mountains. A line of railroad tracks and a sparse string of buildings are squeezed between the north bank of the river and the adjacent cliffs, and a 2-lane thread of road fronts a few more buildings on the south side. The swirling rapids and scenic gorge form one of the most famous whitewater rafting centres in the southeast. Directly upon the AT's river crossing is the Nantahala Outdoor Centre. In fact, the trail passes over the stream on the small wooden bridge along the driveway connecting their parking lot to US 19. They are major recreational outfitters whose facilities include a restaurant, a motel and a large store featuring backpacking and rafting supplies. Dave and I strolled around, absorbing the sights and sounds of the town for a while. It was a lively interlude from the relentless stillness of the forest. Exuberant rafters were milling around, laughing and shouting, riding their post-adventure highs. Trail towns are always an eagerly anticipated blast of excitement for thru-hikers, but Wesser was something special for us tonight. I stayed about an hour. Accumulated fatigue and an impending fair-sized walk back to the shelter pulled me away while the evening was still young. Clouds were also thickening once again. A pint of chocolate ice cream and an icy Coke for my dessert helped ease the pain of separation. I raced back to the shelter in order to relax and enjoy them before turning in. Another big thunderstorm exploded just moments after my arrival. I kicked back on my sleeping bag, enjoyed the fruits of my trip to the snack bar as I took in nature's light show. I've recently developed another double blister on the sole of my left foot, between 2 of the toes, but all of the others have disappeared and been replaced by tough new calluses. This one, too, seems to be subsiding. With the exception of the mangled mass of pus and gore which used to be my little toe, my feet are beginning to become battle-hardened for the endless road ahead. Saturday, the 14th of May, 1983, mile 144.1. Dave and I put the trail on hold for most of today as we sampled the attractions of Wesser. Our first order of business upon re-entering town this morning was another visit to the Nantahala Outdoor Centre store. We topped off our provisions with sufficient food to reach our first Appalachian Trail mail supply drop in Fontana Village. I liked the NOC store. In addition to the usual selection of freeze-dried meals, they also carried the useful everyday items which backpackers can use for trail food, but are much less expensive to buy. Instant oatmeal, minute rice, and potato flakes, for example. If those same items were packaged and sold specifically as backpacking food under some brand names like Golden Sunshine Mountain Harvest, they would probably cost at least twice as much. We completed our food shopping and moseyed on over to the restaurant. Dave selected their all-you-could-eat backpacker special, a lentil soup, home-baked bread and cheese. As usual, I was not feeling very vegetarian today, so I chose cheeseburgers and fries. The waitress looked at me like I was a maggot when she heard of the manner in which I was planning to pollute the temple of my body. But she thought considerably after Dave had offered me a bite of that delicious bread and asked her if I could buy some. It was a thoroughly pleasant meal. The great abundance of solid food which my body had been rediscovering lately contributed greatly to the expansiveness of my own mood. The very casual, outdoors-oriented dining room featured huge glass windows looking out upon the lively set of rapids on the river below. We lingered there for a couple of hours, eating, writing letters, and enjoying the view of rafters and kayakers battling the racing waters. In addition, the place was teeming with those people who slightly resembled Dave and me, but tend to be smaller and curvier and hell of a lot more interesting to look at. I seem to remember from time in my life predating this adventure that they were called women or something like that. We finally dragged our libidos kicking and screaming out of Wessa at 1 o'clock. After crossing the railroad tracks, the Appalachian Trail began a major ascent, rising more than 3,000 feet from the gorge. It was the biggest climb yet on the AT. Nevertheless, the trail was well laid out, and we were now lean, mean mileage machines, so it was no big deal. The ascent passed through vibrant jungles of rhododendron and hardwoods, carpeted with moss and ferns and hung with vines and creepers. We arrived at the shelter at 5 o'clock, at the end of a short 7.5-mile hike from the A. Rufus Morgan shelter. Sassafras Gap was by far the oldest lean-to I'd yet encountered. It had been built in 1939 by the Civilian Conservation Corps, one of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal creations. It looks every bit of its 44 years. But in these southern Appalachian rainforests, it is amazing that the place is still standing after all of this time. An interesting old fellow showed up at the shelter not long after dark. He ate dinner and then presented to us a virtuoso solo acoustic rendition of the famous bean-eating scene from the Mel Brooks movie Blazing Saddles for the remainder of the night. Dave and I kept exchanging queasy looks and laughing as the shelter clouded up. Down, Mongo! Our own digestions were not being aided at all by his performance. Bad Mongo. The old guy was heading southbound from the Great Smoky Mountains, and his dire warnings about the lingering cold up there began to trouble me. He told us that people were compelled to wear wool hats, down coats, and all of their clothes to bed each night. I'd expected it to be chilly in those mountains due to the extremely high elevations, but I'm not prepared for an Arctic expedition. All I have with me in the way of warm clothes are a pair of long pants, a chamois shirt, and a wool sweater. I relaxed considerably when he lay down in his sleeping bag for the night, still wearing his wool hat, his long johns, and his parka. Dave and I are lying in our own bags, wearing nothing but our underwear, and we are just a little too warm. It is the warmest night we have yet experienced on the entire trail.